Michael Schaefer, Ross Johnson, Matt Schultz, and Landon Fry are all here this evening.
Free.
I've been back and
I'm just gonna say it. I've been thinking it for 10 minutes. I don't want a podcast scared.
Oh yeah.
ashes. Now I've seen the road.
Pregnancy is a beautiful thing. Pregnancy is a gift.
Oh, there are stories to tell.
What kind of paint sticks to asteroids? Like, if you don't prime your wall.
Afraid some days, but the road will lead us to a better place.
We are called to emerge from that default setting of self-involvement.
Yeah, that's okay. It says it's calling.
Hello?
We have connectivity. Can you
Mom?
hear her now, Ross?
Mom, it's Ross.
Hello, Ross. What's up?
You're on the Speech Guys. You're live on the Speech Guys.
Live on the Speech Guys. Awesome. What's up?
Well, we're recording an episode. We're about to record an episode.
No,
And-
we
Okay.
are actively recording
you're right,
an
okay.
episode, Patty.
We're actively recording an episode. That was Mike. And we've started a new thing where we just call somebody that we know.
It's not
friend-
new anymore, Ross.
All right, we're at week like 6. We call somebody, a family or friend, to introduce the episode for us. So tonight, we were hoping you would introduce our episode.
Okay. I can do that. I hope.
The speech tonight is in the grouping called Speeches by Moms, and it's called The Ultimate Makeover. Okay?
The ultimate makeover?
Yep. Technically, it's Ultimate Makeover.
Ross, I don't think that conveys the essence of the speech.
Technically, the title is Ultimate Makeover: The Transforming Power of Motherhood. It's about motherhood. So, but to keep it short, we can just call it The Ultimate Makeover.
Yeah, I've got some different ideas for this title.
Okay, Mike might change it.
I heard this. Okay.
Yeah. So anyway, we just want you to introduce the speech episode number, who's on the call tonight, and the title of the speech in whatever way you feel fit to do so.
Come on, Ross. Your mother is not just a number. She's not just a peg. We're looking for Patty to connect with the content. She's a mom, right? Right, Patty?
I am a mom. I am a mom.
Not
Yes,
only
I
are you a
am.
mom, you're a mom to 2 podcasters of 2 different podcasts.
Absolutely. Dogs North and the Speech Guys.
Well, how do you feel about that? Well, let's take a step back because Ross is still finding his way into Speech Guys. Because the 3 Dogs North, now that's a Grand Slam podcast. Those got some followers. What do you think about your son Father Rob being the host of such a popular and one might even say influential podcast?
I'm just very proud of Father Rob and the podcasters of, let's see, it's himself and Connor and Michael Metz. And they're awesome guys. So I encourage everyone to listen to them. They have good messages.
Was there anything you identified in Rob or Ross growing up which would make you say, yeah, I can see something of a podcaster in them?
Actually, podcasting wasn't a thing when they were growing up.
You guys had records. You had phonographs, right?
Yeah, but not really. No, not at all.
Okay.
So this is an interesting thing. So we're talking about speeches by moms, and obviously moms have to take care of people. So you're probably taking care of Dad right now. So Mike, my dad has COVID right now.
Oh,
Mom,
dear.
how is Dad feeling tonight?
He is about the same. Very fatigued and a very bad cough. But getting through it. We're on day 4, day 5 of this. So hopefully, see some improvement tomorrow. That's what we're hoping for.
Yeah. Summer's a bad time to have COVID. I had it in January. You know, one might argue that was a good time if there is a good time to have COVID.
Yeah,
Mhm.
that's it. If there is a good time, I did not realize you had it, Mike.
I did. I would say I was a 7 out of 10 in terms of
Oh golly.
sense of well-being, but
Okay.
you know, just my mom, speak on the topic of moms. Look, they just connect to the speech episode in so many ways. She brought me some chicken noodle soup, some blueberries, some
Ooh.
medicine, which I generally don't like taking, but you know, when life gives you lemons, you take medicine. Um they, things like that. So yeah, my mom was there for
Yeah,
me when I had COVID.
which is awesome.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Mom, I believe you also brought me food when I had COVID last summer. So
I think we did. Yes, I think we did. Yeah.
Hey, Ross, we don't need to compete for who has the better
Yeah.
mom. I mean,
she brought me food twice, Mike.
Or maybe 3 times. Yeah, and ice cream, Mike. I brought ice
okay, everyone calm down here. Let's keep it civil.
Yeah. Ice cream was a bonus, right, Ross?
It was very well appreciated.
Yeah.
Very much appreciated.
Yeah.
So,
Yes.
with that, Patty, people hosting, episode number, and the title, Motherhood is supposed to be hard.
Okay. I'm going to introduce the speech guys tonight, who are awesome guys. And this is episode 27. And hosting tonight are Ross Johnson, my son, Mike Schaefer, and Matt Schultz will be in soon. And the title is Motherhood is Supposed to Be Hard, but really motherhood is hard.
Nice. I love that touch.
Well
And
done.
that is when I say cue the music.
Love you, Mom.
Love you too, bud. Have a good night.
Thanks, Patty.
Kiss,
Appreciate it.
kiss.
From every direction, it will give you eyes, give you hope, it'll give you perspective. I've been back and forth, and yeah, I had my crashes. Now I've seen the road, it goes every direction.
When you guys first presented speeches by moms, I kind of was like, I wasn't super excited about it. But then as I started looking into it, grew on me a little bit. I had trouble picking the speech at first, I'll be totally honest. But anyway, I ended up settling on this speech by Carrie Gress. Reason being, it's actually difficult, and the rest of you guys will find this out when you're doing your own research. If you search speeches by presidents, a lot of speeches come up. If you search anything, but if you do speeches by moms, it's a vague search. All that comes up are Mother of the Bride speeches. That's it. So anyway, I decided to start the quad as opposed to getting too particular. I just kind of wanted to kind of talk about the topic of motherhood. So I really wanted a speech that talked about motherhood, and that was also difficult to find. But anyway, long story short, Carrie Gress is a woman that's written books. I think she has a blog. She gives talks, primarily about motherhood. She's very well educated. I think she's got a PhD. And anyway, Julie has read some of her stuff and really likes it. So that's kind of what settled me on. I kind of decided Carrie Gress in this speech before I even listened to it.
Do you know how Julie discovered Carrie Gress?
It's actually a good question. I do not. That's a good question. She's put out a couple books, Theology of Home and Theology of Home 2.
I've seen that on your shelf. I can verify it's there.
A lot about, I think literally the line below the title says, bringing the eternal to the everyday. So just bringing purpose and meaning to the kind of just basic tasks a mom has to perform on a daily basis. Anyway, so I kind of thought that would be a good place to start the quad before we got too crazy specific, just to let's talk about moms and motherhood and what that means. So that is where we got going. Um,
Well, hey, with that, that's a good setup here to go ahead and listen to a little bit of that speech. Speech itself is about 30 minutes long, which we all listen to. I actually listened to 2.5 times. But yeah, we're just going to listen to a couple minutes of that speech, which stuck out to Ross and I. So with that, let's go ahead and listen to that clip.
So after I finished this book on Ultimate Makeover, I ended up writing my book called Marrying Option. And while I was researching that book, I encountered this story about a priest. And this priest had been a farmer before he became a priest, and he understood how to work with nature and how to grow a good crop and the importance of dirt and wind and rain and all of these kinds of things. But he also understood that this nature, that grace built on nature, that in order to get the supernatural, you have to work with the natural. So his concern was, how are we going to grow vocations? He didn't just look at it as, just how do we convince men to be priests? But he thought, how can we grow vocations? And so what he did was he started a mother's group, a scripture study for women. And then he started a couples group, Bible study. And he started a group for men. And then finally, he did um, groups with the parents and then with the children by themselves. And from there, he really started to get vocations, that there was this fruit that was happening because he started with the soil. He started with the women and um, ended up growing it. The vocations followed from that. Well, what I think this story illustrates is really just the idea that seeds are planted in us, both spiritually but also physically, and that as a result, we are called to nurture and to cultivate our families and those people that are in our sphere of life. And I think we can see just how vital mothers are, especially when you hear the tragedy of a young mother dying. We know that there are few things that can rattle a person more than losing a mother, especially when they're young. And that's because the roots of the person haven't grown deeply enough. They still need nurturing from that mother. And that's obviously something incredibly vital and important. And I don't think we really think of mothers in those terms. But there's a new book that just came out. I just read it a few weeks ago called The Culture Code. And, it's always nice when you have worked on an idea and then it's sort of confirmed in a secular book. But this book is written by Daniel Coyle, who's written, I think, The Talent Code is what it was called. It's a New York Times bestseller. But in it, he looks at different cultures and what it is that makes them work. And he looks at Google, he looks at Pixar, he looks at the Navy SEALs, he looks at the San Antonio Spurs, just a whole array of different cultures. And he says that these cultures, he found them, many of them so infectious that he just didn't even want to leave. He just wanted to keep researching them because he was so motivated and inspired by their work. But he said what these things have in common is just really that there is a sense of belonging and connection between the employees. The people also, second, they realize that they're part of a bigger story. And third, there's this safety and that people can express themselves and really be who they are. There's this very safe feeling that they all have. Well, what does that sound like? It sounds like a family, and it sounds like what the family is supposed to be doing. So it's actually kind of laughable if you think about it. Like, wow, he just discovered the family in a culture.
Okay, Russ.
all right. So before we start, before three guys that aren't moms start talking about being a mom,
Yeah, this is a no mansplaining episode. No mansplaining.
I know. I just thought it'd be fun to kind of like give an ode or a shout out to our moms, just for all that they did and have done and continue to do for us. But also just to kind of share some good memories. So what are just a memory or something you remember about your mom? It can be like how you picture her or things she did, or just like a memory that pops up in your head.
Well, of course, I tried to articulate a philosophy of motherhood for my mom to weave these memories together. And I think there's sort of two broader statements that I'll mention before I go into the examples. I would say emotional accompaniment and setting an example of doing what had to be done. I think those stick out to me. Setting an example of doing what had to be done. I mean, many people have characterized my mom as a jack of all trades. Now, let me clarify, because sometimes when we say jack of all trades, it means that like they're not good at anything. That's not true. This is actually a very simple, easy to understand way to brag about her. One, she's a very talented painter, artist, but also with computer programming, with coding. You guys remember like those boot locker things on computers, like your screensaver that lock. It's just like what Windows has, but like as the name implies, boot locker. Boot locker. No one's getting in. And so my grade school principal, whom she did a little bit of computer work for at the school, he forgot his boot locker password, which, like, the whole point of those things is to make them impossible to get into without your password. And this all happened in 7th grade. And I remember Russ, he was my basketball coach as well. He came up to me at basketball practice that day afterwards, and he said, "Your mom is a genius. I forgot my password, and she got through this bootlocker thing." Okay. Connecting that to a previous point, jack in all trades. I just wanted to qualify the jack of all trades statement there. Examples of doing what had to be done. A lot of very cold nights in the barn, birthing sheep and bottle feeding sheep. I know that farm life growing up that you guys weren't a part of. You guys were off doing your own thing and elsewhere in Illinois. Hosting the famous Win a Fish stand, the St. Joe Parish picnic, and going to extreme lengths to stock the fish bowls. Wading among them, but not limited to, wading through muddy ponds, buying minnows at the bait shop. Am I saying her up for fraud here? I write in parentheses for this note. Last second runs to PetSmart to buy more goldfish. Now, it's like none of these things obviously were being done like exactly to be a mom per se, in the same way like, you know, a good mom makes soup for you when you're sick or something. But there are good examples of taking a tremendous like leadership role in the community, in the church community and school community, because she and my dad too, you know, recognize the importance of building up a very rich and contributing just culture of service, culture of participation in the place where he grew up. So in that particular way, I think she really stood out as a mom. There are other things too. 4-H, being president, cross country meets, things like that. So anyway,
I liked your story about how she would run at your cross country meet.
Oh, really?
That I thought was fun. Yeah, I liked that.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, a lot. She kind of had a cluster, and she's still friends with them, but a cluster of some of my teammates' moms who, yeah, took supporting us very seriously. She might roll her eyes listening to this, like, I didn't run that much. Well, she definitely ran more than a lot of other parents cheering people on. But yeah,
Dang.
I know this ain't football, Ross. Moms don't just sit in the stands clapping their hands with their hot cocoa. Mom's gotta stretch out before a cross country meet. Limber up.
Matt, any memories of your mom?
Well, when you first, I kind of read your list you wrote, Ross, and just kind of got me thinking about, I mean, obviously not every mom. I mean, a lot of moms do make a lot of sacrifices in the day-to-day. A couple, like, I remember standing out as like, oh, of course moms do this as a kid. But like looking back, it's like, holy smokes, like the patience this woman had was just incredible. So there was a stretch where it was Tuesday night. We called it Crazy Tuesday. And it was a night where I had football practice. My sister had dance class. My other sister had something. Like, we were driving all across town. And at the time, I was just like, oh, this is taking forever. Why doesn't mom drive? You know, like kind of the normal, like ungrateful child things that you just
That
don't
light was
understand.
green, Mom. That light was green.
But yeah, like looking back, like now that I know where all of those things are and like the actual effort it takes to like do all of that, yeah, just holy smokes, just and just knowing how we behaved at times as kids, yeah, just certainly gives a whole new appreciation. Not that my mom did a lot more than drive for us, but I guess the driving the driving things particularly seem to stand out. But I know my junior year, the football coaches decided that afternoon or after school workouts weren't good enough. We needed to go before school. So yeah, my mom would have to drive me at like 5:30 in the morning to school to do these workouts and stuff. So it's like something she totally, yeah, I mean, didn't exactly have to do. I would have been pretty upset if that were the case because it would have made me look like even more of a schmuck than I already was on the football team. But yeah, no, like just very supportive on that front. And a memory I remembered, actually Claire and I were talking about this. I'm recording live from her parents' house. But a memory Claire and I just relayed to Claire as we were driving. So my mom we'd have birthday parties as kids. We'd invite, a handful of friends, somewhere between 5 and 8 friends or so. And so this is, maybe age 5 to 8. And she would go through all this effort to plan these, like, I mean, looking back, they're kind of silly games, like pin the tail on the monkey, or just random charades things. There was one that we would look back on fondly. I don't know where the heck she even got this idea from, but she popped a bunch of popcorn and it was like scattered in this one part of our yard. And the goal was to stuff a sock full of popcorn as fast as you could. Basically just like, she must have gotten that from like Cheap Kids Games Quarterly or something. But yeah, just like the effort she went, with just creating like fond, even albeit kind of goofy, things like that, just like to make our birthday special. Like that was something she really enjoyed doing. And
yeah, I think my memories, like, I think kind of like you guys, like just kind of mom doing so many things at home, like laundry, appointments, running us all over the place, like all that type of stuff. I think some things that stick out, like I distinctly remember her staying up late to finish laundry. Like if everyone else went to bed, she would like work on laundry. And it's like, looking back, it's like she totally didn't want to be staying up till whatever hour of night doing laundry, but like that's what she did because she was going to get it done. And then I also remember she didn't miss like, first grade, it's the Halloween party today, that type of stuff. We need some parent volunteers to come help with snacks, whatever. Or the kids are going on a field trip to so-and-so today. Just school things like that, how she was very willing. She was just always at those things and, had several kids in the home. So it's not like it was the only thing she could have been doing that day. So those are just some things that I think stick out when I first thought like, oh, what are some memories of mom? Like as a mom, yeah, those are the staying up really late to do laundry and just making such an effort to make sure she was at all the field trips and class parties and things like that. All right, so our moms rock.
they do.
Sounds like, at least.
Landon's, I don't know. I mean, you gotta be here to speak for your mom.
Noreen is an angel. Noreen's an angel. We'll say that for her. But all right, so how about now? Like all of those are from her kids. What about now that, I don't know? Do you guys think? Obviously, our relationships have changed with them. I mean, in some ways, now that we're adults. But yeah, I guess where have you seen that change, or how do you view them differently?
So one moment I know that kind of changed things, and this is maybe not how, like, I don't know, I think it has changed our relationship to some degree. It's hard to come up with a tangible thing that's different, but I know when Abe was born, I mean, everyone says like, oh, you fall in love with your kids, whatever. Like, you like parents love their kids. That's kind of, I don't know. I guess I, to some degree, took that as a given, like, whatever. But just like how madly and how deeply you fall in love with this tiny human being, like when they're born, was just, to experience it firsthand was just like, yeah, took me back and was just like a really amazing experience. And then just like, I remember in the hospital room, one of those, that first day or two, um, just like contemplating like, oh, like this is what my parents felt at one point, kind of extrapolating that and just having been like, and I just remember like, just feeling a lot of gratitude for them. And just like, dang, like this is like all that stuff they did and felt and said, like, was no joke, because I'm feeling it a little bit more now, and experiencing some of that myself. So, I know that was like one moment where I felt like I understood my parents better and understood like, just the sentiments and, the sacrifices they made.
Yeah, I don't know how I answer that. Well, I mean, what I noted was, a lot of these things I just mentioned before, it's sort of just echoing what you guys said, where you take them for granted when you're growing up in just a very like practical way, like that. That's just how it is. That's what moms do. It's very much like "This Is Water," by David Foster Wallace. It's like
Yeah.
you're in this water without
Yeah.
realizing what it is. Yeah. Um, and in the continuing with that metaphor, right? David Foster Wallace's whole point is that once you realize what water is, it gives you this tremendous capacity and precision with which you can operate within reality. So applying that to being in the mom water, right? You gain a more comprehensive and textured appreciation for the ways in which your mom engaged and continues to engage with your life, and in the same way it allows you to engage more effectively and more comprehensively and more deeply with life. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, just to answer the question, I mean, things that characterize my mom and I's relationship today, annual golf outing. She's actually also started climbing, I am proud to say. I won't say her age, but I will say it is not below 40. Uh, that should be clear since she would have only been 7 years old if she had me at 40. Yeah, I mean, I think we talk more like philosophy, religion type stuff now than when growing up. Although we did back then too. I remember one like memory that sticks out to me, which she mentioned of some years ago. She was sitting, there was lots of times sitting in cars with her, waiting for someone to come out of school or something, or basketball practice. And I think she'd been having like a particularly hard day, sort of wrestling with some dimension of who God was. And as I'm told, I was maybe 4 or 5 years old. I had like stuck my head out the window of the car and then brought it back in. And I told my mom, or I asked my mom, "Can God hear us?" Like at the same time that she was wondering this particular thing, which I suppose was only echoing the question, not giving an answer. But maybe it was God saying everyone wonders the same thing. But so anyway, there's just a little bit of a little few nibbles on aspects of our relationship.
So you were mansplaining to your mom as a 4 or 5-year-old?
Yeah.
I think something I've noticed is with my mom, like I think she really, in a good way, identifies as being a mom, if that makes sense. I think that's really good and it's important and it's a huge part of why I think she is a great mom. And I think it fits well. Hopefully, when we talk about the speech later. So one of the things that Carrie Gress talks about in the speech is like motherhood changes you. And it, I don't know. So I didn't know my mom before she was mom, obviously, but like even now as an adult, I feel like I can still see like, yeah, she's still a mom, if that makes sense. It's not just something that you do for a time and then it goes away. So just a couple examples. Like I remember when I was in college, especially my first couple years, like we would a lot of times, we just bring our laundry home, and mom would do our laundry. And looking back, it was like, well, I mean, maybe I was just a super lazy college kid and had and that was a huge part of it, honestly. But in some ways, I don't want to say she enjoyed it and like it was fun, but um, and I don't even say this jokingly. Like in some weird way, I think she like liked that. If that makes sense.
I'm
Or like maybe a little bit easier. Like a couple weeks ago, we were out at my parents' house, on an evening where I had to go to work the next day. So we were going to drive home, but we stayed there later than we normally would, and we just put the pajamas on the kids and let them fall asleep on the way home. And mom made a comment like, "Hey Ross, can I make your lunch for tomorrow?" And maybe she was totally just being sacrificial and was like, "I'm going to hate doing this." But it almost sounded to me like, I don't know. It almost sounded like, "Hey Ross, I would like to make your lunch tomorrow," if that makes sense. And I just kind of use those two examples as a point. Like even now, even though I'm a fully functioning adult, like she's still a mom, if that makes sense. So I guess that's supposed to be how our relationship changed was the question. But that's just something that's kind of stuck out to me as an adult, that she still really identifies with that. And you can see it like with my kids and my nieces and nephews and stuff. She's more than willing to jump in, and change a diaper or just things like that. So I don't know, that's something that I guess that's not necessarily my relationship with her changing, but something I've seen as an adult is just how much of her is mom, if that makes sense. So that's kind of the best way I can think to articulate that.
She's just momming as mom.
She's just momming.
So, sort of a natural way to sort of float from these personal memories to the speech. Before we started recording, sort of, Ross and I were talking about a book that Julie has on her bookshelf called Theology of the Home, that Carrie Gress wrote, right?
Yeah, that's the woman who gave the speech. Yeah, that's it. Was one of her books.
It's like being a mom, being a lot of different things, but since the speech is opening up the mom speech series, we'll focus on this dimension. Being a mom takes a tremendous amount of faith, right? It requires like the same muscles. And what I mean by that, it's not like you are at some point convinced through the set of data that being a mom to X number of children in these particular ways is the most important, profound, effective way for you to live out this life, right? Rather, it's this thing that has, I think, I'm just speculating, has many of like the same sort of religious qualities as faith in God, faith in Christ, where it's, well, I don't know. We need to have a mom speak about it. This is a no mansplaining zone, right? But maybe that's enough for you guys sort of like get a sort of vibe of what I'm getting at, where it's something that seems that you live into, that in the same way as religion engages all of these different faculties, that it sometimes can feel just very like awkward and goofy and weird and stressful. And at other times, of course, being very, very fulfilling and satisfying and meaningful, right? But with the same ways like religion, or like the more explicit notion of faith or traditional notion of faith, is like you obviously can't just engage or say that it's only worthwhile when it's like the meaningful stuff going on, right? Because when Ross is yelling at his mom for folding his underwear north to south instead of south to north, like Patty has to find a way to deal with that in these very profound ways. For my mom, growing up, faith was a very important thing. She went to St. Mary's Catholic grade school and Notre Dame high school. Right. So obviously this faith muscle was trained and strengthened in a very substantial way, which, as I've sort of made the case, motherhood is in a sense a very similar kind of faith muscle. And with this book like Theology of Home, it's even getting more into the particular details of what is the philosophical or spiritual story of the life that I am trying to develop for my family, right? And the whole point, of course, is that you read this book and you cultivate this notion. It helps give you this particular path as a mom. Maybe as a dad too, because I'm sure this book is pertinent to dads too. So the sort of like come away, take away platform to walk off of here for conversation is to what extent, and Carrie Gress talks about this in different ways, I guess, in her speech, to what extent is our individual's capacity to mother today diminished by a lack of, I'll put it very simply, a faith muscle. And let's just say it's not diminished. Okay, how else is that faith muscle being flexed and trained for mothering? How might it be? How might how might someone answer that who isn't necessarily spending a lot of time with faith type stuff?
Well, I think like you made an allusion to like the "This is Water" speech by David Foster Wallace, and I think that might be that analogy, like the "This is water." I know like one of the things that we talked about with that is like, I think one of our final questions was about like, what's our water, right? What are the things kind of around us in our lives that are so present that it's easy to see through it and forget about it and not notice like the meaning and significance that's there. But that's also kind of like, at least from what I recall of the speech, like that's kind of where he said you are sanctified. And he didn't use the term sanctified, right? He had some other secular kind of like phrase for it. But like that's where things happen, right? And the alternative is basically you're the sort of unconscious, unthinking, android robot that's just kind of aimlessly meandering through life. So like, how does that, I feel like the faith aspect kind of just highlights and just like calls attention to the water that like often is like motherhood, the drives to and from football or baseball practice, like the laundry late at night, the lunches in the morning and things like that. All of the kind of myriad of seemingly petty ways that like, bring a lot of meaning, and that Carrie Gress kind of alluded to in her speech. But yeah, I mean, I know that my mom certainly like would talk about faith as like essential to her motherhood and essential to, just to her living that out. And like, cause that is where she's sanctified, that is like, I mean, her being a mother is like crucial to, the vow that she made when she got married and like the vow that she essentially promised just by like birthing a child and that sort of stuff. Like, all right, like God has put this person in my care, I'm a steward of this soul for however long, I guess I kind of got lost in terms of like the specific question.
That's all right.
But yeah, I mean, I feel
I'll articulate briefly just for Ross's sake and whatever extent for your sake. But I think being a good mom, one could argue requires a certain amount of faith. And so as faith becomes a less, in the traditional sense, a less relevant factor in society, what does that mean for motherhood in the future?
Yeah.
So I'll say two things. So my first one is to kind of say, like, I feel like to kind of see more to how they're similar is it's easy to see how just life, I don't know, not that I'm trying to be all wise, but like as I've aged, which I'm not that old yet, like it's just something I've realized is just how hard life is and how it's not picture perfect dreamy all the time like you think it will be when you're, in college. Um, and I think it's easy to let just the difficulties, or not even the difficulties, but the busyness, I think, and that type of thing distract you from seeing like the meaning or the how where faith is in your life or where God is working in your life. And then it's kind of the same similar, and the fact that those same things make it hard to see, I think, sometimes what is so important about motherhood. So like I guess to try to connect them better, it's easy when you get, I'll be honest, like even as a religious person, like it's easy to, if you get really busy and you've got a lot going on, to kind of quote unquote forget about God for a little bit. And then when you don't think about him, thinking about him, it's easy to fall into the, well, where's God working in my life? Why isn't he helping me? Blah, blah, blah. Um, but then I feel like if you're in a little bit better place and not frustrated, maybe a little bit more at peace, the time like that, it's a little bit easier to kind of look back and then see, oh, that's where God is working in my life. So I don't know if that's an absolute rule or not. I'd have to think about that more. But I kind of think motherhood is the same in the sense of when you're kind of quote unquote in the dirty, doing the work, it's probably very easy to forget how important it is what you're doing. Um, and maybe I don't want to take back everything I said 5 minutes ago about how mom likes doing things for me, but it's very like just seeing Julie be a mom, like it's not always fun, and you don't always want to do the things that you're asked to do. Um, and you do them anyway, and that's probably part of why it is sanctifying. Um, but and I think that's part of what Carrie Gress is talking about when she talks about how motherhood changes you and it brings virtues out of you that otherwise wouldn't be there. Um, and I think in some ways faith does kind of a similar thing, or belief in God or trying to live a certain life or something like that. How would it be impacted, to try to get to your question a little bit, like how is maybe less faith in the traditional sense? Um, how is that going to impact motherhood? I think faith, in a very strong way, most religions, I think, would argue very strongly for the importance of motherhood. Um, you know, um, I did not look this up, but I mean, if you just want to look up what groups of people on some sort of religious lines have the most kids, I bet you'd find mostly religious people. Um, and I think that faith does show the value of motherhood. So without that, I don't want to speak to it too much because I haven't looked into the numbers, but I wouldn't be shocked if you just find that. What kind of effect does it have? I think you just see less motherhood, if that makes sense. Fewer kids, more people choose not to have kids, things like that.
Yeah, and I know, Ross, you posted like fertility rate data, and you posted like the US numbers, I posted like some of the worldwide numbers. And yeah, I mean, there is a lot a lot less motherhood. Yeah. Like I guess I think it would be a lot harder to see the meaning, to see the kind of see the water, appreciate the water of like a lot of the things a mother's asked to do and the sacrifices she's asked to make. Like, holy smokes, just like just seeing Claire go through what she went through just with pregnancy and labor, like that alone, like, like, all right, I'm never going to not listen to you again. It was like a sentiment I had at that moment, or shortly thereafter. And just like the attachment and like just her experience parenting is like totally different than mine, not because of like accidental things, just like, I think they're very much tied to her being a mother. And I'm sure you have like experiences with this too, Ross, but like Claire will sense when something's wrong and she'll just like act on it, like before I'm even aware.
Can you give an example of that?
Well, so Claire was always like a fairly sound sleeper. We were both very sound sleepers, but like Abe's born, he'll wake up 3 times a night and I'll have no idea, because Claire's just like on it. She like the second she hears his voice or something's wrong, like She just kind of steps in and like knows what to do. Like, I'm not trying to be a lazy husband. It's not like I hear him at night and ignore him. I just straight up don't hear him because Claire always does, you know?
Yeah.
And I don't know, like maybe she's a lighter sleeper. Maybe there are other explanations for that. But yeah, like there are definite other memory situations, like feeding him, like how, like, Claire, how do you know this? You know, like,
Yeah. I think Julie's very much better at me at like recognizing just the state of things
yeah,
with kids. So, like she kind of makes fun of me for like getting him riled up right before bed, that type of thing. You know, like why would you wrestle with the kids right before you want to put them down for bed? But just like things like that. I don't know. I feel like just recognizing, hey, we should probably start wrapping this up because even though it's still pretty fun, like in about 5 minutes, it's not gonna be very fun. Or just, I don't know. I feel like she's just so on top of things, or if it's like, oh yeah, it's lunchtime, I should probably start making the kids lunch. It's like Julie's probably already started, or just I think
Yeah.
she's just more. I don't know if that's an intuition thing or maybe some of it's experience because she's home with them more than me. But probably a combination of both. But I think there's just things like that she seems to be good at and better at than me. To kind of talk to the first question a little bit more before we move on to, I don't think it's impossible. I mean, I don't think we're saying it's impossible. Like if people aren't religious or don't have faith, like I feel like they could see a lot of the same things that we're saying. Um, just just merely on the kind of obvious importance that motherhood has on raising children, which are then going to contribute to society. Um, but I think I do agree that faith of some sort would make it easier, I think, to kind of go all in on that, if that makes sense. But
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, just to briefly tidy up that thought, I mean, as we sort of discussed in other podcast episodes, I mean, faith never disappears in society. Well, let me put a different spin on it. I think faith either becomes faith in something else or it just becomes inert. I think that we tend to think in our modern world that it's it's transformed into reason in most people. And I certainly don't. I can see case circumstances where someone might think that were the case, but yeah. Anyway, that's just to tidy up that point a little bit. But yes, we are not saying that atheists cannot be great moms, but we are saying that
we should make that the title and see how many you click.
yeah. There we go. Just go straight provocateur.
the idea of being a mom relies, one might say, on a significant amount of faith, and being a religious person is kind of flexing that faith muscle, which might be helpful.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, and yeah, then and there's such a deep and like thorough framework with which to think through like the parts of motherhood that are unsavory, like the suffering aspect. Like, yeah, faith actually tries to answer the question of like suffering and why that's the case,
So that's a good point to spin off on the title of this episode that came from Carrie Gress's speech. Matt also wrote it down as your first one. Her quote somewhat early on: "Motherhood is supposed to be hard." And briefly, it's like, well, I mean, everything. There's a lot to be said for everything supposed to be hard, but in like different ways, right? It just is like is a thought experiment. There is like a lot of power in that idea. Like how much internal resistance do we create for anything? In this case, motherhood or fatherhood, more relevant to us. God willing, for one of us. How much internal resistance do we create when we expect or maybe just want a little bit too much for something to be easy? So in a good example of that, going back to running, as we so often do, right? If you're if you're getting set up to run just 1 mile or something, and the idea is to do the very best that you can, you are not going to do the best that you can if you do not believe going into this timed mile that it's supposed to be hard, right? If you have this idea, well, yeah, I'm going to do this mile because, it's something people do and la. It's like, no, you're not going to be able to run well. You're not going to be able to be invested in the experience. And when, 47 seconds into this timed mile, when things start to hurt really bad, you're just going to back off and you're just going to sort of mosey on through the event. So yeah, really articulating very specifically, very explicitly, the idea that motherhood is supposed to be hard, the way Carrie Gress expressed it, I think was a substantial thing, a striking thing that I don't feel like we hear about a lot today. Like that's not even to say like you have to become a full full-on conservative to believe that motherhood is hard. But like I get the vibe like some journalists on NPR, like if someone said that, they'd be like, oh no, I'm not voting for Trump. And maybe that's a little unfair. Maybe as I dig through my brain, like I can imagine little bits that sort of point in that general direction, but I feel like we could hear more of that sort of thing.
Yeah, I think kind of the idea. I mean, I think you kind of got at it a little bit, like your running example, which got me a little fired up. I was kind of thinking about how fast could I get a mile done. But just the idea that I think a lot of times meaningful things are difficult. And I don't know, I'm picturing something extreme like Band of Brothers or something, right? They went through just the most extreme of circumstances and obviously came out changed. Um, and I think in some instances, when you go through difficult things, it challenges you and it, forces you to become better. I think motherhood is such a particular way because I mean, a lot of reasons. I mean, I think it literally affects every part of a woman. It affects their body. It affects their mind. It sucks your time. It sucks your mental energy. It sucks your resources. Um, you lose sleep. You don't look the same after you have a kid. I mean, it affects every part of who you are, if that makes sense. So I think it's just such a literally life-changing thing. It's so difficult, and in sadly too many ways is just kind of like we said, there's so many tasks that on the surface seem meaningless, even though I think we would all argue very strongly that they are some of the most meaningful things that you'll do during the day. Thankless job, just you could go on and on. So I think why this talk, I feel like this talk made me a better man just listening to it. It would be just, I wish more people would listen to it because I would imagine, I mean, just like watching some of the struggles that Julie's gone through as a mom. And Matt, I'd like to hear more about your example about Claire and like feeling pressured to go back to work and things like that. I feel like it's one of those things that's like you're going through one of the most hard things in your life, and it's supposed to be hard, kind of like we said earlier, like it changes who you are, Um, and I just think that I think Carrie Gress does a really good job of explaining that it's supposed to be hard, but not making it sound scary, if that makes sense. Almost sounding not necessary, like literally you like have to have a kid, but just so important and such a good thing for somebody. So even though it's supposed to be hard, and you could go on and on and on about why it's so hard, but she doesn't. I don't know. Just after listening to that talk, I don't think a lot of people would want to shy away from it, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I thought it brought courage, and it reminds me of like, I guess parts of Lord of the Rings where Frodo is like finding out how like dangerous the thing is he's doing, but like at the same time, like just having some sort of like meaning behind it, like gives him new courage to like do what he's gonna do. And I guess kind of another analogy to just like stories in general. I think that was in like, so this came from a 5-6 year old kid. So nieces and nephews are staying over. They wanted to hear a story. I didn't want to get out a bunch of books and turn lights on and rile them up. So I just made up a story, right? So I started telling the story about a picnic. I guess it's one that my dad said that he would tell us. And it was just this very nice picnic story, like where nothing really crazy happened. And like, so I started telling this and got maybe, I don't know, partway through. And then, so my nephew, Isaac, says, wait, is anything bad going to happen? Like just cuts up. Basically, this story's boring. What the heck's going on? So at that point I was like, yeah, just give me a second. So then I made up some part about a bird, stealing the picnic lunch, and dad made a lasso and rode the bird around, all this like crazy stuff. Right. So I feel like it's something that's kind of innate in us that like, we do know that bad things need to happen in order for life to be meaningful and interesting, or things need to be hard.
Yeah.
Even as like a kid, like that's a boring story. Nothing bad happened, like there's no villains, there's no battles, there's no love stories, where your heart's almost broken, but yeah, it's kind of I thought a pleasant example of like what you guys are saying about things supposing to be hard.
I just looked at it. I mean, this is actually a quote from the speech. Carrie Gress said, "You can't become virtuous without being challenged." And yeah, I think we all know that that's true, and it's just cool to see it kind of in this kind of different context than maybe three guys would maybe think about it. I think something which I don't want to. I don't want to take Matt's thought about like the work thing, but I think something that's interesting too, just about motherhood and just how it's viewed today, maybe. I definitely think it's like a pressure on women to work in some ways. And trying to think how to articulate this well, because I'm not trying to speak negatively about anybody, but like, so my wife, for example, she grew up, her mom worked as well as the dad as a two income household. Her mom was successful. She was a manager at a company. And then Julie, she went to University of Illinois, got a degree in engineering, which is a very, reputable, a good degree from a good school. Went out, her first job, she made more money than I did. And then she quit to stay home with the kids when we got married and had kids. And I just think that's interesting because I feel like even she, maybe falls in the temptation a little bit, like, is it worthwhile what I'm doing? Because I gave up, she could have been working a job making well over $100,000, and it's just like, I think there's a little bit of I think she knows it's not true, but like just that temptation comes, am I wasting that, staying home with the kids? And I think something that Carrie Gress does well, and at least, I mean, the book Theology of Home is like showing how like what she's doing is so meaningful. And that's not to say that you can't work, because I mean, I think she even said it in one of the Q&A questions. Like some interesting research has come out that like the happiest women are those who have kids and do something outside the home or something like that. But I just think that in today's world, that's an easy temptation to fall into, and I think I'm sure that that's hard to deal with. Just so many different, you're getting told so many things as a woman, I guess that was probably hard to deal with.
Ross, was it discussed that you would stay at home with the kids, or that no one would stay at home with the kids, or anything in between?
We never really discussed it. I mean, I would be okay with it, honestly. Julie's always said she wanted to stay home when they're little, which in some ways just makes sense from a practical standpoint, because we knew we wanted to have quite a few kids, and like when they're breastfeeding and stuff, fetches heart. Like, not that you can't pump and all that stuff, but like in some ways it's easier, I guess, for her to do it. And then we knew we were going to have multiple kids. So it was kind of an easy, like, yeah, that just kind of makes sense. So no, we never have discussed it seriously. I think I would be open to it though, if we felt like that was best. I have a friend who that's what they do. His wife works and he stays home with the kids.
Matt, on that same question.
Yeah, I guess for Claire and I mean, she was very willing to do that. One, I think her job in the emergency department is a very stressful one, and like there is no way you could work full time in an emergency department. I don't think, well, I mean, there is a way. I know people do it. But like that would just be a very, very big challenge. Like pumping in an emergency department is, would be a monumental task. I would think. Just like the stress you're dealing with, like your employer's supposed to make time and set aside a space for that. But like, how do you do that in an emergency department when someone's like bleeding out and like, oh, well, we actually need a body here. Like you need to, like you can't actually do this right now. It's not like they're going to give her fewer patients, so it's an unfortunate situation on that regard. Just the reality of what she would have had to deal with. And she was, I think for us, it was obvious I was making more money than she was. Anyway, so like financially it made sense as well. And like Ross said, just like a lot of the practicalities, breastfeeding, things like that. So yeah, I mean, for us, it was I think a fairly easy, straightforward decision. But initially, like our plan was for Claire to go back to like one shift a week. And her department they needed people. And she was in a good position to negotiate that. So she was able to get like a one shift a week, position made for her in the emergency department. But yeah, just as like Abe was getting older, he wasn't eating great. There are just a few other stressors, regarding that like Claire didn't really want to risk like him not growing and developing well, by like just messing with the schedule and the feeding and pumping and all that. So she just decided to like basically stop working for now. So Claire's been at home full time with Abe since he was born. And but the thing, like, I know Ross, you kind of asked about this a little bit earlier. And that's definitely been something Claire has struggled with, like not to share too many of the details, like of what we've discussed and stuff. But I know she has had a lot of like frustration with, just feeling undervalued. And, people kind of ask her with the assumption, oh, when are you going back to work? Like, oh, when oh, how's work going since it, like people just kind of assume, that that's going to happen. That like, oh, of course you're working. You're a nurse. You've got a degree. Like, isn't that what everyone does? And, I think, I mean, even Claire, someone who's like deeply faithful, deeply values family, someone who like, I know has read Carrie Gress books, and has listened to Carrie Gress talks, like it got at her, and it made her like question, like, crap, like, is this meaningful? Am I doing the right thing? And that was definitely a stressful situation for her, just kind of like dealing with those pressures, and not really feeling, I mean, she feels very supported in terms of like her family's very supportive. My family's very supportive. She's got a good friend group that, like have similar values and like, like the individuals in her life are very supportive, but just like feeling like a culture is very pressuring, like different directions. It is difficult for her at times, that she's, just to kind of really dive in and embrace, the difficulties of motherhood, and that Carrie Gress kind of talked about.
I want to share one thing real quick before we might tidy this thought up and move on to a kind of a different end. But something that sticks out to me, and I know obviously we're talking about the importance of motherhood and the role the mom has in the kids' lives and things. And I mean, I think none of us are saying that, right? You shouldn't be able to work or not. That's not the point we're trying to make. My mom helped out at the store a lot when I was a kid because my parents own their own business, and Julie's has said she would like to go back to work eventually and things like that. So I'm not saying that I'm not trying to make the point like women always need to stay home, but something that sticks out to me. I was still working at the hospital as a physical therapist at the time. And one of the women was pregnant and very far along. Like I think she was literally like, it was one of those like any day now, like we might just be going straight up to the 7th floor because there's probably not time to go. If you go into labor now, she's not going to drive home and just come back. And she was working though, because our company, I mean, you get the 12 weeks off that, the federal law requires, but like you didn't get paid while you were off. So women at my work would always take PTO. So they would always work right up to literally the day of birth so that they would have the full, as much PTO as possible for the time they were going to take off after the child was born. And I remember she was so miserable because it's a manual job. I mean, you're going up and down stairs all day, carrying walkers all day, getting patients out of bed. And I mean, she was 9 months pregnant and she was so miserable. She was in the office trying to do her notes at the end of the day. She had a wet towel wrapped around her neck, so her shirt was just drenched and she was just like pouring sweat. And I remember thinking, I literally almost walked up to her and said, like, go home. Like, I don't care what like gets said today, but like this is not what's best for women. If this is what we're making you go through, is to the point where you have a cold towel around your neck and you're like suffering just trying to get through the day. Like, go home. You are going through more than I can ever imagine just being 9 months pregnant. So like, go home, put your feet up. There's nothing wrong with that. And I wanted so bad to go tell her that, and I didn't, obviously. But it just kind of hit me like, man, this just doesn't seem right.
Yeah, and it's kind of this like, I feel like a lot of the motherhood stuff kind of cuts across party lines in a lot of ways, and like both parties will call the other party hypocrites about like with things regarding motherhood and just other political issues surrounding that, like, which this isn't like a political podcast or not. I don't want to like get into specifics with that, but I feel like the capitalism touting people, and the just the, I guess the less family oriented people seem to, or like aspects of both parties seem to have won out. You know what I like the least supportive of motherhood aspects of both parties, I guess, seem to have won out insofar as like femininity is not valued in its truest sense, and like motherhood isn't valued or devalued, and kind of separated from a lot of like traditional marital values, like on the left. And then also like, just women are reduced to like their working labor capital performing capabilities by the right, you know. I think it's easiest to like critique maybe the right wing folks on this front, because like as much as like they tout family values and supporting families and all this sort of stuff, like, yeah, like the whole like unfettered capitalism side of things like is not good for moms. You know, like just like the situation you pointed out, Ross. And like I think capitalism is like sexist in a lot of regards, in that like if you reduce people to their like wage earning abilities, or you reduce people to their capital building abilities, like, yeah, just the sheer fact that women give birth like is going to put them at a disadvantage, and like they're either going to have to suffer with towels around their necks, or they're going to have to not get paid as much, or not like be as productive. And, you know, if in like this kind of raw, brute productivity measuring world, like they're going to have to pay for that in one way or another, you know? And it's sad. It's sad that like you've got, yeah, both sides, I think, pressuring moms and like devaluing different aspects of motherhood and overvaluing just other aspects of human life in a way that, yeah, I think is a recipe for just a lot of like unhappy women. Because I mean, like Carrie Gress, I think pushes back like really well in this speech about a lot of, yeah, I think she pushes back, I think, more explicitly on like a lot of the left wing concepts of motherhood, or devaluing motherhood. And this sort of like feminist, I'm not just a mom, I can do what I want, you know. And I feel like that marries well into like the more right wing, like capitalist approach, you know, where it's like, yeah, you can do what you want, you can make us a lot of money, and that's it, you know, and not like Ross said, not value the mother as such.
More often than not, you know, the right answer is somewhere in the middle, right? And with yeah, okay, so you know, I've mentioned before with you guys, and have shared it substantially by now, and such, but the story for young adults, saying late 9 to early mid 14-year-old girls. The story, fictional story called Mel and Grady, about a girl and her dog. And what I try to capture in this story is how a young girl might go about identifying these things within her, namely strength and elegance. And how does a young girl go about identifying that, cultivating a vision for development for that towards the future, right? And go ahead and throw in autonomy in there too, just to connect my thought better to Matt's, right? Where full autonomy of the woman is like the left ideal, if you will, and full strength of the woman is in a certain way the conservative ideal, right? It's like finding the objective and true and good middle of that is the most. I mean, that's the most challenging thing of anything, right? Because it's really, really simple to always believe the extreme about whatever thing that there is. It's like the only, like, how do you go about finding that right middle? I mean, the story of Mel and Grady, the way that I see it, it's this artistic contribution towards finding that middle, right? Because art, I like to think, has some sort of way of observing all of these different ways and all of these different things that one observes in the world, and expressing a particular story that people can latch onto and say, oh yeah, my life is like that, and I'm going to go about living in this way that's sort of like that in order to get to this point. So it's like, what are the stories about women / moms that are attractive, popular, not necessarily right, but they're the ones that are popular, attractive, people latch onto, and young women are shaping their lives around from the best of our sense.
Besides Mel and Grady. I mean, I think one narrative perhaps is like the mom who, quote, has it all, might be like one extreme. So like working mom, either has a part-time, if not full-time job, but still like does a lot for the kids and like does that sort of stuff. I think that might be like one narrative, so to speak, that's out there. I think a lot of folks, I mean, there's also like, I think the often like mischaracterized like stay-at-home mom would be the other end of that spectrum. If you want to like have a narrative, like, are you asking more for like specific like characters in art? And
yeah, I'm looking
Okay.
more for specifics. I mean, what you got is fine, but yeah, specifics if you can think of one.
I don't really watch movies or TV, so
I mean, I think we can all picture like the stereotypes. Like there's the, conservative mom that has 6 kids and they're all super well behaved and she has them in church. And then there's the hardworking mom that has 1 or maybe 2 kids and, works a full-time job and is super busy at work and that type of thing. So I think there's a lot of like stereotypes out there, which I don't think is fair. And I think most people would recognize that if you asked them. Something that hit me a little bit, I don't know if this perfectly answers your question, but I remembered something. I just looked up the quote, and I have not read the full text of this, so President Macron is welcome to come on if he wants to explain himself further. But the president of France, there's a quote that said, educated women don't have big families or lots of kids, one or the other. I guess I can't say quote if I don't have it in front of me, but it's one or the other. And there was like a Facebook meme when Amy Coney Barrett was about to be nominated for the Supreme Court that said, watch me, because she's got like 7 kids and she's a Supreme Court justice. So that kind of struck me a little bit. And obviously, like, Amy Coney Barrett's very present in the news right now after Roe v. Wade just got overturned. And a lot of people love her and a lot of people hate her. I like her. I think she gets a lot of slack she shouldn't take. But
I saw her at mass a couple weeks ago. I went to mass with her.
really, Where at?
At South Bend.
Oh,
Her
yeah,
her family was very well behaved. They sat in the middle, not in the front or the back, just like a good American.
So anyway, but I like that kind of hit me a little bit. Like, he presented at least the stereotype I was saying. That's what I was trying to say. Like, when that quote, educated women don't have big families or lots of kids, whichever it said. And then she, though, is the opposite stereotype of that. It's like, watch me. I've got 7 kids and I'm a Supreme Court justice and I have a law degree and all this stuff. So I don't know, like, that's the first thing that came to my mind is like, well, she is definitely one of the narratives is that, and I'm sure she wouldn't say this, but like, at least on the surface, literally has it all together. In terms of, yes, I have a big family and lots of kids and I'm, going to church with them. And I'm also working an incredibly demanding job. So I don't know if that's perfectly what you were asking, but that's what came in mind for a story or a person living out one of these narratives.
Yeah, I mean, to answer my own question inadequately, I mean, I think the simple answer is they're the most prominent stories about women in today's culture. I mean, story of a Black Widow comes to mind, right? Which, whether it's the most popular or one
as
of
in the Marvel character,
is right.
I literally thought you meant an African American woman whose husband died.
Come on, Ross.
I'm sorry.
Gosh, you guys are such dads.
Some people have diapers to change.
I was like, is this going around the news right now? Did I miss something?
Yeah, and obviously there's like Black Widow. She's Natasha Romanoff, her alias, her Christian name. Yeah, I mean, obviously, yeah, she's very strong. I mean, that's good. I mean, I want my daughter to be strong, my spouse, God willing. I want my mom to be strong, my grandma. But of course, like, one wants them to be other things too. I
mean, I think one interesting thing that I would say might, and like I know I posted the Time magazine article from like 2013 about like at that point the seemingly new trend of like of family, of like couples who weren't having any kids, in this sort of childless life, and just kind of talking a lot about the negativities of motherhood and parenting and how it detracts from your career and all that stuff. I think like the interesting thing is that I actually agree with a lot of those points and agree that motherhood is not for everyone, or at least like biological childbearing motherhood is not for everyone. Like that much I think is 100% true. But at the same time, like we also live in a world where there's no, or at least not like a well-supported, celibate group of people, in either gender, really. Like, sure, there's Catholic priests that might have like more of a presence in modern America, but like religious sisters have declined like drastically, like unbelievably in the last generation, which like, yeah, that's a group of women who were legitimately by their faith not called to motherhood and diaper changing and laundry for their kids. You know what I mean? Like, and a lot of them do have like careers, right? They're public speakers, they're theologians, right? They're professors, they're, doing things in big ways, they're getting education and they are not having kids in order to do those things, right? So I think that that's one thing that is a very valid critique of like a lot of like traditional, like the traditional values, quote unquote, people, right? Like there is more to life than motherhood. There are other options out there, and like both require strong, capable women that you mentioned, like Black Widow. But like there's really like for just a long time, especially in America, like there wasn't really a strong presence, and we're seeing like now a generation that grew up with like zero contact, unless except for very small communities, like zero contact with like strong, capable celibate women, which I think is an interesting
Okay,
factor.
but to push on that point a little bit, does that mean then that if you don't feel called to motherhood, then you are probably called to become a sister?
Maybe, I don't know. I mean, like we believe, like, and I know I can speak for the three of us here, but like, I mean, most Christians believe there's some sort of connection between marriage, sex, and family. And like keeping that connection intact is an important thing. That's something that like most of the modern world disagrees with. So like insofar as like you think that connection needs to be very like maintain, that needs to be an integral thing, all of those things need to be like integrated with one another, then like, yeah, if you are called, like, I think they're very real people who like, there's a religious sister who works at our hospital as like a engineer, like a biomedical engineer. I don't know her exact title or expertise, but some sort of like very intellectual, like a lot of training, more knowledge than I'll ever have about that stuff, but she's a religious sister. So she goes to work and she has like kind of normal hours, so to speak. And then she goes home to her community and they do their prayers together and they do, live out their community life in whatever way they do. But like to some degree, yeah, like, and of course there are married people who can't have kids, like there's fertility issues, like that's a whole different calling that like maybe we're not going to get into in this talk, um, but yeah, like I would say if you are, I mean, it's a very real calling in like a variety of ways. And like there are women who are called to both, right? Being a mother of a child and working, right? Like I work with several of them, like good women, like faithful women. Even if they're not faithful, I know they're just taking good care of their families and they love them. And they also like really value their career and they love helping people in their career. So like, yeah, there's callings on all ends of that spectrum. So like it's not like necessarily either career and celibacy or motherhood and nothing, like, yeah, there's a whole spectrum there in terms of what you're called to do in life. But I just think it's an interesting correlation between this like rapid decline in religious sisters and people who've committed their lives to things other than children or having biological children. And then also like,
yeah,
there's
that's
people
an
who
interesting
don't want to
thought
have any
there.
kids, period. And they're committing their lives to like worthy things. Like, I know in the Time article, like, yeah, there are people doing really, really cool, good things with their life in lieu of having kids, which might be legitimate, but.
Should we think about the roundabout question here? Bring us home.
Should we tease Anne Marie joining the podcast again? Cause I'll be seeing her tomorrow. So I'll be popping.
Oh,
I'll be dropping that
fantastic.
question, I assume.
Yeah, definitely.
But just make sure she's interested, though. I don't want like a pity yet.
I'll make sure.
I'll take a pity, yes.
Yeah, I was gonna say that Marilyn Monroe episode was good. So, but yeah, I'll yeah. So listeners, I know I'm breaking the fourth wall. Look forward to.
I mean, I'm making the Google invite right now. I'll wait to invite her, but I'm willing give her full control over the episode.
Whoa, really?
What? This
Yeah.
has never happened before.
Yep.
All right, I'll float that to her. See if she's interested or if she'd rather us pick. But I would sacrifice my pick for hers if that's the way she wants to go.
Okay.
I won't. I'm picking
You
mine.
already picked yours.
I know.
But yeah, no, I'll float that out there this weekend.
So I have a closing question. I think is a decent question. What's one thing you'd say to your mom? It's got to be short. You can't write her a 2-page letter here, anybody. And what's one thing you'd tell your daughter, or maybe daughter, if you're ever going to have one? Like, I don't know. I'm not saying like on her wedding day, but like, as she's becoming a woman.
Just what are we gonna tell our mom or daughter?
So I think that's a 2-part question. It's like after all this talks on motherhood, is there nothing like if you had to tell your mom one thing, just like it can be thank you. I don't care. Like, do you have anything you'd tell your
Let's
mom?
keep it to one sentence, just to make it a definite thing, because otherwise I don't know.
So, I mean, what I got from my daughter, I mean, sort of just reiterating what I was riffing on with Mel and Grady, but I could see it as being like a really quick snippet, that, I don't know, might be every day before she heads out the door. Just how like Notre Dame football players I've seen, they slap the sign as they walk out to the game. But saying to my daughter something like or exactly like, be strong, be elegant.
I like that.
I like that. I like that. It's probably on a t-shirt somewhere.
Never mind. What was that?
I said it's probably on a t-shirt somewhere. It's like a picture of a unicorn or something.
I doubt it, but let's just check. Be strong. Nope.
I hope it pops.
The closest thing to it, be strong and courageous.
Totally different. That probably didn't sell any shirts.
I actually really like that.
I
Mike.
think I would
Dang.
say,
Oh, thank you.
I do like that. I gave no thought to this question because it just popped into my head like 10 seconds ago. I think if I had one thing to say to my mom, I think I would just say thank you and I'm sorry I didn't say thank you more. Yeah, I think that would be it. I do have a daughter, and I do actually try to think about like the father of the bride speech already. That may or may not come someday. To try to bring the talk out and what I'd advise her, I might tell her be strong, be elegant.
Yeah, Mike. Dang, that was No, I do really like that.
Maybe like just something not trying to sound. When I said it in my head, it sounded like I was trying to sound smart. But just like don't be afraid of motherhood or something like that. I don't want to. That sounds pushy, like you have to do it. So I don't know. I'd have to tidy those words up some, but something to that effect. Like don't let it scare you.
I think the natural corollary that comes to mind, like for my son, God willing, it would be strong, be honorable. And obviously you want your daughter to be honorable, as well. My son, not exactly elegant, but I mean, the corollary, like maintaining a certain style of appearance. I think, but I think the point, like to sort of like hone in on those things, is like, it's not like I need for my daughter to be able to bench press a certain amount of weight, but I think it's very much like the idea to like believe that you are strong, like seeing something heavy and not saying like, no, that's too heavy, I'm not picking that up, but like give it a shot. Can you pick that up? Yeah, you can get it. You pick that up yourself. And being like elegant, it's not necessarily like wearing makeup every day, but it's, boy, now I feel like I'm treading into mansplaining territory. This is all speculation. This is all speculation.
Andrew will give us the real answers next episode.
Yeah. But what's one small thing you might do in that particular day to make yourself slightly more elegant? I don't know. I'm scared to go too far into
I think
that.
there's a certain like Carrie Gress mentioned in her speech, like I forget it was some colloquial name for grandma. It was like Mima or Mamu. That was it. Yeah, Mamu. There's a certain grace that, like, whether it's correlated with any sort of aesthetic or like superficial elegance or not, there's a certain grace, I think, there.
Yeah, I mean, okay, here's actually, there's sort of riff on that because she had talked a lot about gossiping. Yeah, okay, the one way I'm going to be elegant today, I'm really gonna focus on not gossiping. I think that'd be a really beautiful way to express that. Yeah.
I think, yeah, and I like that. One other thing I think I tell my daughter, before I let Matt take his thoughts, so like a lot of times when I'm like, if I don't know, if I put Catherine to bed or something, like I'll say a prayer for her, and a lot of times I'll just say like I pray and I hope that she always like knows her worth and doesn't accept less than that, and that I somehow how I treat her will help her to do that well. Like that's kind of my, I don't know if I word it exactly. I kind of word it pretty similar to that. Um, so I think I would just try to express that in some way, like know your worth and don't take less than that. And I mean, I think that applies to like kind of like you had said earlier, Matt, like the two sides. Like in some ways, some people could hear that and like, yeah, I do. I should get more money. I shouldn't get less just because I'm a woman and all this stuff. And I'm not saying no to that at all. And then to the right, like, yeah, like if you are forced and you're in a job to work until you're sweating and putting a cold towel on yourself, like that's probably not also getting your worth,
Yeah.
So I think that might be something I'd try to articulate to her a little bit is like, you are worth a lot. Don't take less than that. And both sides would probably take it their own way and they'd probably be right in both of them. But I might try to say that in some way.
Yeah, I think so. I guess I would say a similar thing, but just kind of flipped a little bit to both sides. So like to my mom, I would say like, I never knew how much you loved me, And I just think that
Good.
my
Nice.
experience.
You won that one.
Oh, thanks, man. But yeah, I think just my experience with like holding Abraham and seeing like Claire give birth and just like, yeah, I knew my mom went through that, but like just experiencing that in a more real way was like, wow, I never knew how much you loved me, Mom. Like, dang. And then also to like my daughter, it would be like, you have no idea how much you're capable of loving, because like, yeah, whether she has children of her own or whether she does something else, like, yeah, like she is capable of doing like a lot of good and like loving a lot of people and showing that.
And all of our listeners can just look to this link at the bottom of this episode, the link to our store with all of these quotes on T-shirts, in various colors.
Our store is closed. We have no staffing due to
staffing shortages.
But
I already told my mom I was gonna write her autobiography. So she can't be contained in one pithy sentence like you guys.
Is the subtitle of her autobiography Strength and Elegance? Or maybe that'll be the title, Strength and Elegance, the Mrs. Schaefer story.
Maybe. Strength and Elegance through the generations. Yeah, cool. Okay. Next episode coming up in a few weeks, number 28. That's getting pretty darn close to number 30.
Whoa.
That's pretty exciting. Yeah, we'll look forward to talking with you then. Until then, thanks for drinking and thinking with us. Cue the music one more time.
To a better place. Road will lead us to a better place. Hey, yeah. To a better place.
Ding, ding, ding. Can I have all you guys' attention? Thank you. So my name is Mike. Steven did give me permission to supplement Adam's speech here. Think of this speech. So as Adam, of course, grew up with Steven in South Bend. Myself, Taylor, Father McShane, Eric, we represent, sort of Steven's college, post-college friends. We like to call ourselves the Dinkleys. If any of you guys are familiar with Tolkien, C.S. Lewis, they call themselves the Inklings, because of their literary Catholic thought. So if we can be sort of like them, that's sort of what we're going for in our friendship there. A lot of us know Stephen, of course, really well here, but maybe there's like half or 2/3 of you here who don't necessarily have the image of Stephen that really brings to mind the sort of like qualities that's going on there. And now I wish in the next several illustrations they could be like both Stephen and Tegan's stories. Well, one of them is. And of course, like I don't want to like give the impression that like this is like only Stephen's day. But as I tell these stories, I want you to think of them as in certain ways an illustration of Tegan as well, right? Because as you hopefully you'll see, like she's gonna be the one who's engaging and is wrapped up and is sort of a part of all these different qualities, right? Who's able to reciprocate, who's able to punch at her weight with these qualities here, all right? So, 3 stories, 3 brief illustrations here to give a certain insight into Stephen's soul. The first is speaking to Stephen's humor, his sort of like dry humor. When we were in college, his first year, I was his RA on our floor, so 1 year older. And some of you guys know I'm sort of a cheap person. And when I left for college, I just like grabbed whatever towels were in our bathroom. And one of them happened to be this towel that looks sort of like a towel that maybe was used for Moses in his baby blanket. It had like this sort of color scheme that sort of looked like Israelite-ish. And its proportions really just did not match my body. So I showed a lot of hip walking down the hallway on our dorm. And Stephen recounted how that this was the baby blanket used for Moses, right? Just that really dry, witty humor that many of us have grown to love and appreciate about him. Second illustration, image from Stephen's life that maybe not many of you are familiar with or have seen was during Biking for Babies. Biking for Babies was the thing that myself and Stephen and several friends here have participated in, where we bicycled 1,100 miles in a week for pro-life work. And Stephen has the distinction of bicycling further than anyone ever has in a week for Biking for Babies. And how that came to be was this way. Southeastern Missouri, there was a particular day where we were bicycling 165 miles from Dykman, Missouri to my mom and dad's in Freeburg, Illinois. And it was about 110 miles in where the group started to get a little separated. Stephen happened to be on his own. He was sort of in the middle, stranded between these two different groups. And there was a pretty major turn that came up in Perryville, whereby all of us, the two groups, went right, and Stephen went straight. Now, what happened with this detour meant that it added an extra 10 miles to the day for him. And of course, we eventually realized where Stephen was, lost in the Mississippi River bottoms, and myself and another support group member went looking for him. And of course, at this point, he was already ahead of us. He could have gotten in that van and still set the Biking for Babies week-long record for bicycling. So I was sort of expecting him to get in the van. We came up to him and found him there. He had like these Bob Vila safety glasses for cycling that year. Came up to him in his Bob Vila glasses. So Stephen, make sure you get in the van. We'll jog up to back up to the living room. He says, no, we're going to keep going. We're going to bike the rest of the way up to Chester with you guys. So we did. He ended up bicycling 175 miles that day. 1,110 miles for the whole trip. Now, of course, you have to imagine to have that resolve, that hardened spiritual and physical resolve to do that particular thing. It's a really extraordinary thing. Pretty exceptional. Not something that you are fortunate enough to be witness to all the time in life. Third point is in regards to his thoughtfulness. So at Stephen's art exhibition a month ago that I went to go see, there was a point where I was looking at the other displays and I was speaking with one of his classmates. who seemed to know him particularly well. She was actually also from Indiana, so they had that Hoosier connection there. And I asked this young woman, what is the most remarkable thing about Stephen Graney? And she said his thoughtfulness. He is the most thoughtful person I have met in my entire life. And of course, I agree with that. I can identify with that.
I'm sorry, there was a ticket right there.
We found the ticket. We'll pause the speech.
Okay. I'm gonna.
Here you go.
You need a receipt?
No.
Thank you.
Yep. Have a nice day.
Now, Stephen actually does not know this story, but it is an actual illustration of Tegan's thoughtfulness that was particularly striking to me. Actually, after the fact, it was actually so thoughtful, it was more thoughtful than my own thoughts about myself. So, my birthday this past December, I was with Stephen and Tegan and a couple of other friends, and we were discussing, what activity we should do next for fun. And I think we were deciding between some type of board game or maybe going out. And Stephen, in his very logical way, he sort of convinced me, we should actually stay here and play this board game. That sounded like a good idea. I'm like, oh yeah, that's sort of a good thought. And Tegan had the clarity of mind and heart to stop and say, oh Mike, what do you want to do? And it was I said something like, well, I guess I actually do sort of want to go out later. And again, it was this way of speaking into something that she saw there that in that moment, Stephen did not quite see. And even I didn't, being able to see this kind of simple desire of my heart to go out for a couple of beers with friends on my birthday, right? It's rare that you see two people who perform at such a high level in the spiritual life and the life of virtue. And of course, right now, we see so much this need for two people to come together and become greater than the parts they are. And I can't necessarily imagine what that's going to look like for them, but I feel very fortunate that it has obviously begun to happen over the past 5 hours here. And so this is a public service announcement. This is a spiritual public service announcement, is that when we go home tonight or go to our hotel, it's to say a prayer of gratitude that their union has begun and that we've been privileged to be witness to this exceptional, this emergent thing which has become here. So with that, thank you, Stephen, for this additional 6 to 7 minutes here. And we'll toast to that and hope you guys all have a great rest of your night. Thank you.